Hello and welcome back to Mark's NOTCAST. It's number 470 today. My name's Mark. This isn't a podcast, hence it being a NOTCAST. And I am talking, as I always do, about records I like, love, or merely own. And in some cases, records that many people don't even know exist. More people know it exists than own it, and more people own it than like it. That's often how I like things, because I am niche. No, I'm not niche. Actually, I am, come to think of it. And I just talk about things that interest me, and by the look of my viewing figures, not a huge amount of other people. But so be it. It is episode 471, I think. It is the 4th of December, 2025. It's dark. I'm not wearing sunglasses. Let's hit it. I am talking about the 5th studio album by Goth Overlords The Mission. An album which not many people own, according to its chart placing, and not many people like. And I think it's regarded somewhat as the bastard stepchild of The Mission. Every band has, as Neil Tennant calls it, an Imperial Phase, a phase where they are bulletproof and can do no wrong. At least every successful band does. And for example, Pet Shop Boys had the moment when they released Domino Dancing, and instead of their previous few singles getting to number 1 or number 2, it got to number 9. And they were like, that's it, we're down the dumper. Masque is most definitely The Mission going down the dumper, and only in terms of commercial profile as opposed to artistic success or creativity. A band like The Mission, people put them in a box, and that box is called goth with 2 F's. It's dark, it's moody, and that's not what I think The Mission ever really were. They were goth adjacent, but they were actually, if you listen to things like Children, the album Grains of Sand and Carved in Sand, the 3rd and 4th albums, The Mission aspired to be a great rock band like Led Zeppelin and the Rolling Stones, and that they didn't quite make it for a multitude of reasons, most of which were outside of their power. And Masque was one of those attempts to make a broad and wide-reaching record that spoke to a great many people, and at the time of release it just didn't. It's not a failure. I really, really rate Masque, but it suffered from nothing that the band did and everything that people who pretended to like the band actually thought. They were like, where's all the goth songs? Where's the dark shirts? Where's the tours and the dry ice and the miserable songs about women in lakes with swords and things like that, and the mumbo jumbo and the hocus pocus, instead of listening to the record that they were actually presented? And of course, the world changes around you over time. And if you go back a little bit earlier to a couple of key events which really overshadowed the existence and success of Masque, we have this fascinating autobiography by Wayne Hussey, the band's leader, vocalist and sole constant member throughout the lifespan of the group, Heady Days. And it details 2 things that dramatically shook the Mission's world from its axis. The first one, the departure of the band's then guitar player, Simon Hinkler, who is now back in the band, on around about the 20th of April, 1990. Suddenly the band stuttered from its Imperial Phase and then became fallible. That kind of holy kind of, not trinity, quadrology? No, that's not the word. The holy quantity that was 4 people was broken. And you think about bands that have been successful, Led Zeppelin, U2, Rush, for example, Suede. Those are bands that had very, very stable lineups with very little change in them, apart from either right in their early days or imposed by health, especially in Rush's case. And for The Mission, it was when Simon left, I think, that people started to see the cracks in the band. And also, the wind changed, and the band didn't necessarily change in the same direction as the wind, if that makes sense. Fame is a spotlight. It kind of floats over people, and sometimes it sticks with them for a long period of time, and sometimes it doesn't. And for The Mission, it stuck with them for several years, and then it didn't. And then the thing that happened, though, was that the world went in one direction and The Mission went in another. I should point out, by the way, of course, that the thing that changed really was Nirvana in 1991. At a stroke, the opening notes of Smells Like Teen Spirit made bands like Motley Crue, Stryper, Warrant instantly redundant and ridiculous. But other bands also suffered. 1991 was the year that acts like the Sisters of Mercy, the Fields of the Nephilim, The Mission, perceived as goth by the people, were effectively kind of dethroned, I think would probably be the words. And that's nothing to do with the bands themselves, although the Fields of the Nephilim did split up, and everything to do with the fact that the wind changed in a slightly different direction than the band. And that's not a criticism. The second thing that happened that impacted enormously upon the Masque album, and this runs through all the lyrics of it like a stick of rock, is that Wayne's then prominent relationship, it turned out that his then partner was being unfaithful to him. However, I should point out, in Heady Days, Wayne is fairly clear that he was popular and was guilty of much the same, possibly on a far greater scale. I'm not sure, but it presented so the Masque actually is one of the great breakup albums of all time. Maybe not as good as Bob Dylan's All Tangled Up in Blue, but there is a song called All Tangled Up in You, which the band were playing. And the first roots of Masque appeared in 1991. The band played their two final shows with the four-piece lineup on stage. Mick Brown on drums, Simon Hinkler on guitar, Craig Adams on bass, Wayne Hussey on guitar and vocals, aided with two additional instrumentalists. For 1991, this was Anthony Thistlethwaite, who played fiddle and instruments in The Waterboys. I believe it was fiddle, I could be wrong. And Martin Alcock from Fairport Convention. Martin died in 2018. And they played several new songs in these two engagements. They played the Birmingham Institute, which I think was the 29th of May 1991, and London's Finsbury Park, which I think was on the 1st of June 1991. I saw the Birmingham show by virtue of the fact that the previous Birmingham gig in 1990 had been cancelled due to snow, and I think only 50 people could turn up. So the band rescheduled and did a secret warm-up show for their 1991 headline appearance. It was the last time that those four musicians, Mick, Craig, Simon and Wayne, appeared on stage indoors, was in Birmingham, and I was there. It was also my first Mission gig because I was late. At 1991, at the time I played the gig, I wasn't even 18, by the way. I was 17 years old. I remember telling my mum and going, it's a secret gig, and she thought I was going to a rave, and she was worried that I was going to get loaded on ecstasy pills or something. And I'm like, do you know how timid I am as a 17-year-old? I don't think those are the exact words I said, but I kind of laughed. That one was made very clear. No, they're a big band playing a small room. That's the secret part of it. And the shows, I really, really enjoyed the Birmingham show. They opened with Beyond the Pale. They played a number of songs for the first time. I think they played Trail of Scarlet, She Conjures Me Wings, You Make Me Breathe, From One Jesus to Another, and a song called All Tangled Up in You. So 5 new songs alongside the assortment of hairy old goth classics, of course. A great gig. Absolutely loved it to bits. And it was one of the first gigs that I went to properly where I thought, found my thing. You know, when you're about that age, you find something and you go, that's a thing. I've discovered a thing. I love that. That's my thing, you know. That was one of my moments where I thought, yeah, going to shows at bands that I love, that's going to be a core part of my identity. And even this year, a relatively quiet year. I've been to quite a few gigs this year. Not as many as my biggest year, certainly more than 2020, where I only went to 7 shows. Nonetheless, that show at Birmingham showed the first roots of a new musical direction for the Mission. They were stepping outside of the box of goth, which people had placed them in, and were starting to think about, you know, a wider instrumental approach, a wider set of lyrical concerns, a less, perhaps one could say, cliched visual identity. You know, there's no way that you could have taken, for example, this cover, Masque, which features what looks to be 3 ritual masks from some form of religion from a country which is most definitely not England, but possibly may have been stolen out of the Wicker Man. With the 3 members of the signifying the 3 members of the band, and it's interesting as well that Masque counts for a number of things. Masquerade for example, but all around deception, which was obviously with the various infidelities that were going on in Wayne's relationships, could be considered to be part of that. But also the masks that we wear as individuals, but also the masks which have been placed upon the band by the fans. People wanted a certain type of band when they listened to The Mission. They wanted Led Zeppelin gone goth, and that's not what Masque was at all. So Masque was a great name for a record about taking the mask off and showing what was really going on underneath. Some bands you listen to, they're fantastic. I saw the Fields of the Nephilim last month. Amazing band. Absolutely love them to bits. But they are very one-dimensional, and that dimension is darkness, dry ice, and thundering bass. Other bands, you kind of go, how can you encompass the entirety of an identity and maintain a consistency and a consistent brand identity in that? If you're The Cure, sure, you can do that. You can do a song called Love Cats, and on your previous album, it can be called Pornography and it has no singles on it. Well, technically, The Hanging Garden was a single. And then the next album can be Psychedelic Syd Barrett on a Trip Gone Wrong. So, yeah, it's all parts of a relationship and all parts of a personality. Masque was The Mission stepping outside of the predefined cliches that people said, you are a band, you only exist inside that box, you get out of that box, we shove you back in that box. And it was a very limited worldview. Now, also, by the way, much as I love Nights of Ebb, and as you can see, I'm wearing an Ebhead t-shirt for Nights of Ebb, much as I love Nights of Ebb, if they suddenly came out with a song that sounded like Bob Dylan, no matter, even if it was the best song Bob Dylan had ever written, Nights of Ebb fans would be like, it's awful, I hate it, switch it off, get me something that sounds like three angry men shouting at computers, that kind of thing. And The Mission at this point were a band in a box. They were reduced by people in their fan base that were sometimes small-minded to a set of cliches, reduced to a parody of an identity. And The Mission dared to dissent with Masque and made an album that was far better than people gave that album credit for. According to the biography, Names of a Tombstone's Baby, written by, I should know this, I was looking at this earlier. Which takes its name from a line in Live and Let Die, that great but not at all racist James Bond film that has aged badly and is not great at all. Masque was intended as a solo album by Wayne, and it became a Mission album as Craig and Mick played on it, and over time suddenly kind of evolved into, this isn't a Wayne solo album, this is a Mission album, isn't it? And the band didn't really necessarily fully exist as an operating touring entity in 1992 either. They played two shows, both in France, one at a Virgin Megastore, one at an FNAC record store, short sets, 30, 45 minutes to maybe 200, 300 people a night, which, considering the then previous gig was headlining Finsbury Park to 50,000 people, is quite a step down. But I don't think The Mission were really capable of touring at that point. And also, I don't think the audience was necessarily there. The fickle finger of fame will change. And I remember when I was 17, 1991, when I was 19 in late 1992, if a band disappeared for 2 years, that was a third of the time that I've been liking music. That was an eternity of time. And if a band came back and changed, I wasn't sure, and that I wanted to go see them, because you have that brand recognition, you know what you're going to get, and then all of a sudden someone goes, yeah, but now we're doing kind of like stadium pop rock, and you kind of go, well, that's not what I come to The Mission for. It's like, much as I love chocolate milk, it's if you buy a can of Coke and you open it and there's chocolate milk inside, it's not that the chocolate milk is bad, but it's not a can of Coke, is it? And I think that's the problem, is people had built up in their minds an identity for The Mission and became a little, they spurned the band a little bit because what was inside wasn't what they thought they were going to get. And a lot of people had kind of gone, well, Nirvana are my thing now, Soundgarden, Faith No More, they're my thing. Pearl Jam, with all that yawling, they're my thing. Kind of, I like The Mission when I was 15, 16. I'm embarrassed of that now. And that's the nature of trends and trend setting. Now looking at Masque from a 33-year remove, it's a much better album than it was given credit for at the time. And I liked it. I liked it a lot. But I was like, this is not my Mission. This is a slightly different Mission. It's good, but it's slightly different. And that was reflected in the album's commercial kind of performance. It got charted at number 23 in the UK charts. There was no tour to back it up. The opening single, where, for example, Butterfly on a Wheel went top 5. The opening single from the album is Never Again. Here's a CD single of it, which got to number 34 in the charts. And despite being played, I think, 193 times by the band live, was never regarded as a classic. I mean, it absolutely should be. So for the album Masque, and especially for songs like Never Again, Shades of Green, Trail of Scarlet, the previous kind of lyrical inarticulacy, which Wayne had exercised, which is that lyrics were placeholders for sounds and they were generated phonetically, I think, in some respects. So, for example, that line about mumbo jumbo hocus pocus, there's a 10-inch wall running through the streets of New York and all that. And those weren't words. That was word salad. It didn't mean anything. It was like somebody had stuck a bunch of words into Brian Eno's verbicizer and come up with some things and went, okay, that sounds blah, 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 like that. That imaginary language song, with the name of which I can never pronounce, but is currently on an advert, with the name of something like Imprampusas or whatever. And you kind of listen to it and you go, it's what English sounds like to somebody that doesn't understand English. It's like the whales in Star Trek 4, that when they're trying to replicate the whale speak, it sounds like whale speak, but it's not whale speak, it's nonsense. And some of the lyrics on Carved in Sand, as I criticised the album for at the time, not great. Lyrics on Never Again and most of this album, much, much better. So Never Again, for example, it's about impressionistic views of multiple cities where there have been intense moments of romance, attraction, sex, basically. Do you remember Paris in the Rain, for example, is one of the ones. It's similar to Into the Blue in so much as it kind of reflects a different cityscape in each verse. But this time it's wrapped around a structure and a story, and you go, he's actually using the lyrics to communicate something. So, as I said, great breakup albums of all time. Masque is one of them. John Grant's Pale Green Ghost is one of them. Blur's 13 is a great breakup record, but people forget it's because they've got other silly songs on. It got to number, I think, 34 in the charts. And suddenly everyone's going, that's not my Mission. It's 3 guys, not 4. They're not dark. They're wearing bright clothes, etc. And it didn't sound dank and dark and kind of Led Zeppelin-esque, which you would expect. So it didn't do particularly well. I bought the CD single, which is backed with a track called Beautiful Chaos. Beautiful Chaos, by the way, has the same shared lyric as the track Shades of Green. And so therefore, when you listen to Beautiful Chaos, if you listen to Shades of Green, you go, it's the same song with 2 different approaches. Fascinating, actually, to listen to the different approaches that exist with the same lyrics and the different treatments you can give them. Certainly more interesting than Guns N' Roses putting 2 versions of Don't Cry on the same album just because the lyrics are different. The other thing with Never Again is that this single was also back for the first time with a chock full of remixes. There's an F1 mix and a 0G mix, and I don't remember anything about either of those on the grounds that I don't. And the album was produced by Mark Saunders and The Mission. I think, was it track 4 was mixed by Joe Gibb. So track 4 being one of the remixes. So the band were going through, they didn't have a definitive mix of some tracks. They didn't have a definitive set approach to it. We're going to record stuff. We're going to see how it goes. We're going to come out with it and see where it is. And that didn't do great. And it wasn't, backed up with no live shows and no TV appearances, just videos. It started to feel that The Mission were having a tough time of things. The idea of a band that plays music, makes records, etc., just wasn't there anymore. The Mission were a band, but they weren't doing the things that bands do. If you wanted to plug the album in the way which most conventional people would do, the Mission would have been on the festival circuit in the summer of 1992, playing places like Roskilde's, Pink Pop, maybe Reading or something, where previously they might have headlined, now they might be third on the bill, but they still would have been there. But that absence really, really hurt them, and I don't think commercially they ever really recovered from the 2 or 3 big things, one of which was the change of the lineup. The second one was being absent from the live stage. So even if they weren't selling records, people go, "I'll go and see them live." And then the third one is obviously the huge musical change of direction that the band were kind of exploring. And to talk about that, I think Wayne was listening to a lot of folk music, hence the addition at live shows of members of Fairport Convention and the Waterboys. Mick was heavily into the Leeds dance scene. And so you have these 2 disparate kind of influences alongside Craig in the middle, trying to find some kind of middle ground where you can create something. And sometimes that works excellently, and sometimes it doesn't. And in the case of the second single released from the album, Like a Child Again, it worked excellently. This got to number 30 and played live 345 times by the band. Certainly the song from Masque that I've seen performed the most. And it ties in with some of the other themes that we have, that came up in God's Own Medicine, about, forgiving and forgetting, moving forward after a betrayal, the idea of falling in love again, starting a new relationship, love and rebirth that goes in it. You make me happy and I hope you feel the same, and you make me feel like a child again. And you kind of think, that's not the lyrics, which, the Mission are meant to be angsty and angry and creating these huge soundscapes, and then they're doing this great folk rock pop track that, had it come out a year before, probably would have done quite well. I remember a year before, the charts were very popular with, the Wonder Stuff, Pop Leads Itself, Ned's Atomic Dustbin. That was the kind of sound that the band was starting to lean before. But by the summer of 1992, Nirvana had been, and they'd wiped the battlefield clean of the previous names and started again. And that was really difficult, actually, because I still love this music. But I was going, now that I've heard Nirvana, I'm not sure that it's as good as I thought it was. Nonetheless, Like a Child Again, here released on a 10-inch single, also in 12-inch single form, and also, of course, the good old-fashioned CD single. And actually, I've got 3 copies of this, which is the most copies I've got of any of the singles from this era. Made it pretty clear that this was probably the best and most commercial track from the album. Of course, bands were sometimes releasing a good but less obvious track as the first one, because they got that kind of arrogance going, we can release something slightly shonky as the first single because it will sell plenty of copies. Yes, I'm Looking at You, the 13th by The Cure, and Barrel of a Gun by Depeche Mode. The idea is you don't put your best song first because you've already got a guaranteed chart placing. It was a little early, I think, and if Like a Child Again had been the first single, maybe things would have been different. Maybe they wouldn't have been. Who knows? Like a Child Again. So this is the limited edition 10-inch single. Features an extended mix, a remix, and a track called All Tangled Up in You. Also features, side 2 is a special etched disc. So let's have a look at this special etched disc and see what it is. There it is. Does that look special? Not particularly. It's the mask that's featured on the cover of Like a Child Again in a kind of carpet type arrangement. Is it any good? I don't know. Good thing I never listened to it. I don't really see much point in etched discs, really. But, as a novelty, they work quite well. They're a tad frustrating if you were hoping for, I'd like some more songs. But you don't always get what you want. I think I have a Bowie live album where the 6th side is an etched disc. Maybe I do, maybe I don't, can't remember. It's also backed up with a Hushabye Baby remix of the track. And the Hushabye Baby remix track features, and this is quite controversial, I think the only recorded instance where a member of the Sisters of Mercy plays on a Mission track whilst they are a Sister of Mercy, if that makes sense. Features, because that Hushabye Baby is effectively a completely rethought, reimagined rearranged version of the song with extra guitar by Tim Mad Axeman Guitar Brascino of the Sisters and All About Eve, and then later CNN. And he does a great job, and Tim subbed for the Mission and played in the Mission for a few shows in 1990 as well. I think Like a Child Again is a great single, but again, if you come to it going, well, I want a goth masterpiece, that's not what you're going to get with Like a Child Again. You're going to get a pretty darn great record, but you're not going to get perhaps what you were expecting. The album came out 22nd of June 1992. It got to number 23 in the charts, and it didn't have a great life after that. And again, nothing to do with the record, everything to do with the perception of the band and the cliches and narrow-mindedness that people bring to it. So the inner sleeve states quite clearly a dramatic entertainment of the 16th to 17th centuries, consisting of pantomime, dancing and song. An amateur musical or theatrical production. The words and music for this was short for Masquerade, variation of Masque. So it's making it quite clear that it's setting its stall out. This is a work that's meant to be consumed as a whole, a dramatic entertainment. There's pantomime, there's dancing, there's song, and that's not quite right. But perhaps if you were listening to it and going, is that what you think we should be doing? Maybe not. So additional musicians on this album, by the way, above and beyond Wayne Craig and Mick Brown. Mark Saunders, Joe Gibb, Anto Thistlethwaite, as seen at Finsbury Park. Martin Alcock, as seen at Finsbury Park. Kelly Hussey, Bev Perrin, Penny Thompson, Rick Sanders, and Arabic orchestration by jazz bastard maestro Coleman of the Killing Jokes. That's an interesting kind of perspective to throw into it. And obviously the first track is Never Again, which has a different, more dramatic intro. And I do like Never Again a lot. The third single, second track from the album, is called Shades of Green. And this is where Wayne is really just pouring his heart out onto the page. It's a song about lies and infidelity. It's a song about cheating, but also there's a degree of obliviousness to his own actions and kind of responsibility in that, because clearly if you've read the book, you'll know he wasn't always a faithful dude, and this isn't a judgment, it's just more of a statement of going, well, if it's good for the goose, it's got to be good for the gander, right? There's a degree of public shaming about that, there's a degree of ostracisation about it, there's a concept of sin and guilt in a rigid social structure, but there's not necessarily any accountability. So, for example, there's the lyric around it's easy to forgive, but it's so hard to forget. It's easy to see how deceit becomes regret. And I can see now we're apart how your mind's played tricks on your heart. Now, there's a lot of use of the I there in the first person and going, is he talking from another person's perspective about his actions, or is he talking from his perspective about another person's actions? And then also the line, and you never knew that I was also untrue. There's so many shades of green, and you never believed that I could ever deceive. There's so many shades of green. And it alludes to, and is very clear about, I was a naughty boy too, but it's not necessarily taking the appropriate amount of accountability and responsibility for that at all. It really isn't. And over time, my view around the song has changed. At the time I heard it, I was in my second relationship. My second relationship lasted for 7 years, and it was very good. And I had lots and lots of very positive points about it. First relationship ended terribly, and the other person in that relationship I caught in bed with somebody, and that somebody was not a stranger. And so when you think about that, it's like, then I was thinking about it and applying this song to that and going, not sure. Because obviously we all bring, as listeners, our own ideas around a song. We all bring our own perceptions of what's going on. We bring our own interpretations to it. So even an REM song like the one I love, a song that has a cruel line about, you are a simple prop to occupy my time. effectively going, well, I'm only with you because otherwise I'd be bored. And a lot of people see past that, or don't see that, or stumble over it because it doesn't suit their conventional idea what that lyric would mean. And apparently the one I love is played at weddings. I mean, of all the songs to play, maybe not one where you address your betrothed as a simple prop to occupy your time is the right place to do it. I don't know. But obviously as a listener, we bring our ideas to it. And the thing that we interpret and the thing that we hear isn't always necessarily the thing that is said. So Shades of Green, the second track from the album, also, by the way, the third and final single, played live 30 times, got to number 49 in the English pop charts. And Shades of Green was issued in a number of formats and didn't do, as I say, particularly well in the charts, got to number 49. So the first Mission single in a long time that didn't get in the top 40 and barely got into the top 50. There were 2 CD singles. This one signed by Tim and Jez from the Utah Saints, who remixed it. And effectively this contains a very nice remix EP from the album. So this is backed by a 7-inch mix by the Utah Saints of Shades of Green, a Casbah mix of a track called Sticks and Stones, a guitar mix of Trail of Scarlet, and a barn mix of You Make Me Breathe. So a 4-track remix EP from the album, which kind of betrays, not necessarily, I think betrays might not be the word, but kind of shows the degree of, not inconsistency, but the degree of uncertainty around the definitive mix of a track, because there are a lot of tracks were remixed an awful lot. And this, for example, features a sitar mix of Trail of Scarlet and a creepy crawly mix of the track Spider and the Fly. So again, you're then looking at, across this, 5 separate songs remixed, plus remixes of Like a Child Again, Never Again. 7 songs from the album are available in remixed form. This is a less shiny, less picture discy second CD single of Shades of Green. And also, of course, your standard lovely 12-inch here. This features, again, 4 tracks on it. The barn mix of You Make Me Breathe, the creepy crawly mix of Spider and the Fly, Sticks and Stones, and the extended 7-inch mix of Shades of Green. Side 2 is a special etch disc. Let's see what that is. Aha! And that is, again, a Masque from the cover of Masque. So there you go. That's The Mission, Shades of Green. I suspect I'll be using this as the thumbnail for the track. And in fact for the whole episode, but again, you know, a 4-track remix EP that effectively is a mini remix album of the whole of the record, or selected parts of it. And I like Shades of Green. It's a very, very good song. If Bob Dylan had released it that year, people would have gone, it's amazing, it's the best thing he's done since, I don't know, I Ain't Got No Soul or whatever. I don't know, he hasn't done a track called that. But people go, it's the best heartbreak song he's written in 18 years. But because it was The Mission, people weren't expecting it. People didn't give it, I think, the appropriate due and respect that it deserved. More full then. Track 3 actually is Even You May Shine. Which is around religion, and again, the lyrics are actually about something as opposed to about nothing very much. And Even You May Shine is about some crazy holy roller trying to sell you Jesus, trying to sell you Helter Skelter. And it kind of leans into a little bit about Charles Manson. So now Watch the Little Piggies Run for Shelter, Helter Skelter, Kingdom Come, Genocide, and you know, too many Christs and not enough crosses. Who shall we crucify now? Yeah, and music, by the way, is co-written by Anto Thistlewaite there of the Waterboys, showing that the band are, or at least they're trying something new. And Even You May Shine's pretty good. The 4th track is Trail of Scarlet, a song taking its cue from terrible phrase. Scarlet letter, the letter that is written to reveal some infidelity between 2 people to the unaware other party in the dynamic. It's probably where what comes from. And then there's the lyric about, you know, you left a trail of scarlet, like footsteps in the snow. And this one is quite direct about how the infidelity came to light, and it's quite clear around what happened. And I mean, this is why, I mean, to an extent, I think if you're talking about personal things online, you have to be careful about what you're saying, because the other person in that dynamic may not necessarily have the right of reply. And I'm going to be talking about that at some other point where I think about Radiohead, actually, because I remember that there's a Radiohead song, which I think is called Punch Up at a Wedding, which was written about a review of the Oxford South Park show in 2001. And Tom didn't like the review of the show and said, this person said all these terrible things and I don't have a right of reply. And then he wrote a song and put his lyrics on a 2.1 million selling album. I'm kind of going, I think you've got a right of reply there, Tom. Shut the fuck up. So you have to be careful when talking about real world events and people that don't necessarily have the ability to stand up for themselves in a dynamic that is unequal, where one person has a megaphone and the other person doesn't. And as I'm sure you might have worked out, there's been a personal ruction in my life with a person who I am no longer in contact with, and I'm deliberately not saying very much about that on the grounds that there's no need to make absolutely everything 100 bazillion% public for absolutely everybody. You know, some things, they're just between people. Right, so Trail of Scarlet, I pronounced that terribly, isn't it? Trail of Scarlet is a really good song. And it's got a really great line about, you leave a trail of scarlet everywhere you go and I'm the very last to know. And this is interesting because I wrote a song called The Last to Know recently, which came about the idea of being that actually when you are the last to know, other people know things that you don't. And it's not about you're the last to know in so much as you're the last person that it's informed, but other people know things that you don't about your relationship and how that dynamic operates. And then of course, that's an interesting position to write about. And I was more thinking about when people commit kind of grand deception on a huge scale, and they do it for an extended period of time. It's not just, harmless bumbling about at that point. It is, a concerted effort to deceive, and that in itself, as opposed to anything else, is quite difficult to live with. Track 5, Spider and the Fly. It's a metaphor for seduction and sex, like a lot of songs on this album are actually about, and it opens, save me from the spider begs the fly. I caught in her web and she's bleeding me dry. Now there's a degree of women are evil in certain parts of certain songs on this album, but when you've had your heart broken by a woman, allegedly, especially in those times, perhaps it was easier and perhaps more acceptable to paint themselves out as the poor innocent man to whom this evil woman did these terrible things, and not to take accountability for your own actions within that. Sometimes people do that and you haven't done anything to deserve it, and sometimes people do that and you've done an awful lot to deserve it. And it's difficult to really kind of reconcile those two positions because they can exist simultaneously at the same time. Track, I think it's 6. Oh no, it's She Conjures Me Wings, which was played live in 1991. In fact, She Conjures Me Wings was played a total of 5 times live between 1991 and 1993. Twice at, Birmingham, Finsbury Park, the Virgin and FNAC in-stores, and one of the shows in 1993 before it disappeared forever. And I like She Conjures Me Wings, but, there's always a but, it doesn't sound like The Mission. It's got this lovely kind of sauntering, woozy horn section. It sounds a little bit drunk, and the music is co-written with Anto Fisselwaite from the Waterboys, and it sounds like a great Waterboys song. And would it necessarily sound like a great Mission song? I don't know the answer to that, but what I do know is I liked it. It went, and when I saw it played live, it was good, and I wish the band played it more, but they don't. Then we've got Sticks and Stones. And again, I know I'm a legend because I've seen my name slandered on the dirty subway wall. No, not my type of lyric at all, but obviously taking its cue from the line, Sticks and Stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And, if there's one thing worse than being talked about, it's not being talked about, according to Oscar Wilde. Clearly someone that hadn't been talked about the way certain people have been talked about. We've got Like a Child again, which is a fabulous track. I love it to bits. And then Who Will Love Me Tomorrow, which is co-written musically, I believe, with Miles Hunt from The Wonder Stuff. And it sounds exactly like what would happen if 1992 The Wonder Stuff and 1992 The Mission did a song together. And again, it's one of those songs that's about the fleeting, tangential nature, the temporary nature of love and romance. Is go, who will love me tomorrow? And again, going, yeah, you know, the thrill of romance, the thrill of the chase. It's great, but what will happen tomorrow? Followed up with You Make Me Breathe, which was only played live, well, only 44 times between 1991 and 1995, and then occasionally about once a year between 2000 and 2003. I like You Make Me Breathe. But again, it's a love song, and lyrically that's quite one-dimensional, because the lyrics on this album tend to veer between, you know, heartbreak, infidelity, being madly in love with somebody, and, you know, the power dynamics that sit alongside that. So yeah, not perhaps it's quite soppy, and you know, I'm British, I don't do emotions. I think I smiled once, I had fun once, it was terrible, as the cliche goes. So yeah, good, but again, not my favourites. And then From One Jesus to Another, which was only played live once in Birmingham, which means I've seen 100% of the live performances of From One Jesus to Another by The Mission. He's played it live, I think, about 9 times. Wayne as a solo artist in 2019. And that's okay. And then there's Until Another Sunrise, which is buried deep inside the hurting and the pain I've got to hide, until the healing comes, quiet and sure, like a mistress visiting me. And there's never another sunset until there's another sunrise. And it's a great song, actually, musically completely perfect to end the album. Got a huge sense of climax and release. But again, better lyrically by far than 94.7% of Carved in Sand. But as a whole, the album, I think, was out of time. It was very good, but perhaps the summer of 1992 was not the right environment for it to be born. It just didn't take to water. It didn't live. And, you know, with the failure of live shows, or the lack of live shows and the chart positions, as an album, it was somewhat stillborn, which was a real shame. And part of it, I blame on the fans, because they're so, okay, that's not my mission. I want my mission dark and gloomy. It's like, are you dark and gloomy all the time? I've seen Goths on a Friday night, and I've seen that blog, Goths in Hot Weather. I know they are not dark and gloomy all the time. And it just seems a bit of a shame that the existing prejudices of part of the fan base actually prevented this record from being as widely accepted as it should have been. On the singles, I think, as I've said before, there are 2 bonus tracks. There's Beautiful Chaos, which is the B-side of Never Again, and that is the lyrics of Shades of Green to a completely different set of music. There's All Tangled Up in You, which obviously takes its title from a Dylan song. Played live twice in 1991, really enjoyed it. And again, I think it's an underrated Mission song. There was also one more track recorded during this period, not particularly well known. It is on this Ruby Tracks, the 1992 NME newspaper mail order CD, which features artists covering number ones. And this features, well, amongst many other things, The Wonder Stuff doing Slade's 'Cause I Love You, the Jesus and Mary Chain doing Little Red Rooster, The Wedding Present doing Cumberland Gap, wasn't expecting that. Carter USM doing Another Brick in the Wall, that's not great. Blur doing Maggie May, which I don't think has been reissued. EMF doing Shut Up in Your Face. Suede doing Brass in Pocket, that is incredible. Tori Amos doing Ring My Bell. Mark Allman singing Like a Prayer, I'm going to have to give that a listen. And The Mission covering Blondie's Atomic. And yeah, it's great. It's a great cover version. It's probably on YouTube. Give it a listen. Probably not worth buying a whole album for. In fact, I remember seeing this at a record fair for £5, and there was a pile of them and the guy sold through them. Everybody that saw it bought it. You know, there were like 2 left, and the record fair had been open for like 10 minutes. It's like, why is everybody buying it so quickly? And I went, it's all artists performing number ones. So if you like any of the bands that are on here and you don't want to pay £35 for one song, you'll pay £5 for one song. And if you like multiple bands here, you'll pay £5 to get 10 songs. So it's basically like buying a single with B-sides, isn't it? And it's like, okay, maybe I should have charged more. But I paid my £5 and I left like a true Sun newspaper journalist, made my excuses and left. Craig left the band in November 1992. Some accounts say he was sacked, some accounts say he jumped. I don't know what happened, and it's, you know, it was very coyly described at the time, and that meant then that the Mission were 2 people, Wayne and Mick on drums. They needed to build a new lineup, which they did, and that is the subject of the next episode, where the Mission go into their, well, I mean, effectively phase 2 of their career. As every band goes through a number of iterations, the Mission then became a slightly different band. Still good, as good, maybe not, but still good, because they'd changed and we'd changed. And that is my next episode, when I talk about the Mission in more detail there. But for now, I'm going to wrap up. And if you spent, good Lord, 46 minutes listening to me talk about the Mission, firstly, well done. Thank you for staying on board. Secondly, if you kind of think, oh, I've never really given this album a try, I think you should. I think you should give Masque a try, and you should listen to it with the gap and the distance, and just come to it with an open mind. And what you'll find actually is a very good record that just wasn't quite right for the times in which it came out. There are some great songs on Masque. There's Never Again, Like a Child Again, Shades of Green. There's, I think, Trail of Scarlet's very good. There's some really good stuff on here. There's some not so great stuff on here, but at the same point, it's more important to try something and fail than to end up constantly repeating yourself, because if you do what you've always done, you're going to get what you've always got. And if nothing else, we only get one shot through this life. We only get one opportunity to live it. We all have regrets. Most people apparently think that they should have had more sex during the course of their life, and that's probably a very common regret for a number of people. But other things we should do, we should be true to ourselves. And if anything else, Masque is a case of the Mission taking the mask off and showing us who they could be and putting themselves out there. And as Wayne sang on the song Raising Cain, the gift of Masque was like pearls before swine. Masque is a very good album. It may not be what you expected. It may not be what you as a Mission fan wanted, but it's what you got. And with a 33-year remove from the release of the album, I think it is aged very well, and it's well worth a re-evaluation. So spend some time with it if you like the Mission, and come to it with an open mind, and you may just be very pleasantly surprised. And with that, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you. Be excellent to each other. Stay beautiful, beautiful ones, and I will see you another time. And in the meantime, have a good time all of the time. Okay. Bye-bye.